3 p.m. We're going to call this meeting November 14th, 2024. Note, this meeting is being televised, streamed, or recorded by Bourne TV. If anyone in the audience is recording or videotaping, they must acknowledge such at this time. Use of flash photography during select board meetings is prohibited. If anyone from the public wishes to access the meeting, they can do so by calling the following conference line: 1-929-205-6099. Zoom meeting ID is 895-9907-4498. Password is workshop. The Zoom chat will not be monitored. Participants who wish to speak must raise the hand icon until the chair asks them to unmute. I will be chairing until Chair Mastrangelo arrives. And I don't see any public comment. Is anyone here for public comment? Yes. It's allowed for 12, all right, 3 minutes, a total of 12 minutes. And just come to the mic. Oops, be careful. No worries. Come to the mic and just introduce yourself and go ahead. We do the salute the flag first.
I do want to just remind everyone
yes.
that public comment is for items that are not listed on the agenda.
Yes. Non-agenda items. Thank you, thank you, Marlene.
So if it's not
If
related
it's-
to the agenda?
Yeah, it is. And I didn't know if the board was going to be taking other comments.
We do.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. That was my fault. Okay, so we can take a moment. Do you want to do the announcements first?
Sure. We do have a couple of housekeeping items. I am going to enter some correspondence that was received onto the record for the board. But before I do that, I know that Anne Marie would like to make a disclosure.
Okay.
Before we start, I wish to disclose that I received an unsolicited email sent to my personal email account from a representative of one of the HCA advocates that concerned the applications and presentations and the board scoring of the same. I have not circulated that email to any other members of the board. Because it was not properly submitted to the board as part of this process, I will not consider that email or its content as part of any and all of my deliberations.
Thank you. So noted.
And then as part of your proceedings today, I would like to disclose 2 items of correspondence, and I'm going to read them for the public that have been received by the board. The first is a letter from BGR Law Firm dated yesterday, November 13th. This was received by my office, and I distributed it to the select board after receipt. It reads, I am writing in anticipation of the Bourne Select Board's, the board November 14th, 2024 hearing to determine which applicants the board will enter into host community agreement, HCA negotiations with. This letter does not supply any new information in response to the RFA, but analyzes the existing regulations and the scores that were awarded to conclude that Bourne Canna LLC, Stories Cannabis, BLC, is deserving of an HCA in Bourne. Although the first section of this letter cites regulatory reasons for entering into an HCA with BLC, BLC is also a worthy recipient of an HCA irrespective of the regulatory considerations. As BCL,
Can we mute? Yes.
yep, hang on, sorry. As BCL is the only applicant to be awarded scores of 74 out of 75 available points. Please pass this letter along to the board. 1, negotiating a host community agreement with Bourne Canna LLC would satisfy the equity considerations in the current regulations for the cannabis industry in Massachusetts and produce the most revenue for Bourne when compared to the other non-social equity applicants. The social equity regulations for marijuana establishments in Massachusetts, 935 CMR 500.181, have one clear goal: to prioritize industry participation by qualified social equity businesses, particularly in municipalities that have not yet allowed any marijuana establishments to open. As Bourne has no other operational marijuana retailers, BCL received the highest individual score of any of Bourne's other RFA applicants, and BCL is the only social equity business that has applied. At least two sections of 181 would support the board's decision to enter into an HCA with BCL. A, as Bourne has adopted a social equity policy, and that policy allows the select board to reserve one HCA for licensed applicants that are social equity businesses, entering into an HCA with BCL may create a presumption that Bourne has complied with the Commission's minimum acceptable equity standards. BCL is the only social equity business as determined by the Cannabis Control Commission, CCC, or Commission to respond to Bourne's RFA. And as such, Bourne may satisfy the Commission's minimum acceptable equity standards for promoting and encouraging full participation in the regulated marijuana industry by allowing BCL to commence operations before any of the other applicants. Although it is unclear whether strict compliance with 935 CMR 500.181 by a municipality is statutorily required, 935 CMR 500.181(3) reads in relevant part, equity standards for host communities to promote and encourage full participation in the regulated marijuana industry. A, municipalities are presumed to have met the Commission's minimum acceptable equity standards for promoting and encouraging full participation in the regulated marijuana industry by taking one of the following actions. 1, adopting an ordinance or bylaw to exclusively permit social equity businesses for 3 years or until the goals of the exclusivity period have been met. 2, adopting the model ordinance or bylaw created by the Commission to permit social equity businesses. Or 3, creating a local approval process for equity applicants that is administered on a one-to-one basis, where a general applicant may be approved only after a social equity business has commenced operations. Host communities may choose to administer a one-to-one local approval process until such time as 50% of the licenses operating in the host community are social equity businesses. CMR, oh, sorry, that's the citation. 935 CMR 500.181(3)(a). Of the 3 options available for Bourne to presumptively meet the minimum acceptable equity standards enumerated in 935 CMR 500.181(3)(a), the board may satisfy subsection 3 by awarding an HCA where BCL will work expeditiously through the balance of the local approval process and commence operations, thus allowing Bourne to issue other final local approvals to any of the other applicants. B, as BCL is a qualified social equity business, an applicant in Bourne may consider prioritizing HCA negotiations with BCL to achieve full compliance with 181. 935 CMR 500.181(4) states in relevant part, A, host community shall prioritize negotiations of HCAs with equity parties. There's a footnote, number 1, regarding that CMR. BCL is a clearly qualified applicant, and as such, Bourne's decision to comply with subsection 4 and prioritize negotiations with BCL would be reasonable. C, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 64N, Section 5, requires the state treasurer to distribute an additional 1% of Bourne Canna LLC's revenue to Bourne because BCL is a social equity business. There was also a footnote number 2 with regards to that statement. Not only would it be reasonable to negotiate an HCA with BCL due to BCL's obvious qualifications, it would be in compliance with the letter and spirit of Regulation 181. It would also be financially profitable for Bourne to do so, as Bourne would receive an additional 1% of BCL's revenue pursuant to the legislative incentive for communities to cite social equity businesses found in MGL Chapter 64N, Section 5. 2. Although Bourne Canna LLC's overall score placed them in 4th place out of the 6 applicants, there's a footnote number 3 included. A more detailed analysis of the various scores indicate that BCL is nonetheless a highly qualified applicant deserving of an HCA based on its score, irrespective of the legislated and regulatory incentives and requirements for communities to cite social equity businesses. As the board is aware, the total points available were 75. BCL is the only applicant to receive a 74 out of 75, and indeed, BCL received 2 74s. BCL's score was less than 5 points from 2nd place and less than 10 points from 1st place. It's not as if BCL was a distant 4th and submits this letter to garner an HCA for which they were not qualified. Moreover, a thoughtful consideration of the scores leads to the conclusion that BCL's low score of 40 may be related to BCL's location, which one board member described as challenging. Given that BCL's social equity business status awarded BCL 25 of the 75 points, a score of 40 would mean that BCL only merited 15 points for both the ownership and business plan sections. Given BCL's owners have extensive cannabis experience and one is a Bourne resident, a total of 15 for these 2 sections, particularly when 2 other members saw fit to award 49 points for these 2 sections, raises the question why. BCL believes that its location is not a legitimate reason to reduce BCL's score, given that the location section in the scoring matrix was for no points, but only considered whether an applicant has legal control over a properly zoned property, which BCL does. 3, conclusion. Given that via Bourne's social equity policy, Bourne notified applicants that it may reserve 1 HCA for social equity businesses, Bourne could, without controversy, negotiate one of the 3 available HCAs with BCL. The regulations and legislation for the cannabis industry incentivize and may even require Bourne to do so. Finally, BCL is a highly qualified applicant that was awarded 2 of the highest individual scores of any of the 6 applicants. For the foregoing reasons, Bourne Canna LLC respectively requests that the board negotiate an HCA with BCL. Where given BCL's capitalization and experience, BCL will quickly bring a thriving cannabis business, jobs, and revenue to Bourne by siting in a long vacant property. Sincerely signed, Valero Romano, attorney for Bourne Canna LLC. The second piece of correspondence received on the record was an email from Mr. Steve Stroni that was addressed to me this afternoon and copied the 5 board members. It reads, "It has been brought to our attention that the Bourne Select Board is considering offering HCA negotiations to Stories Cannabis, even though Stories did not score in the top 3 of the Select Board selection process for cannabis dispensaries. Were the board to take this action, we believe it would violate the rights of the top 3 scoring applicants under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. A link is included from Wikipedia, Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard. We strongly encourage the board to offer HCA negotiations to the top 3 scorers. We point out that the board pledged to follow a fair and transparent process. The process for selecting the top 3 applicants was developed over 7 months with significant public input and in collaboration with town council. to deviate from the process for any reason at this point would be grossly unfair to all the applicants that participated in the process. Signed, regards, Steve Stroni. Those are the two items to add to your record.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other disclosures for the record?
I did disclose.
You did your
I did my
disclosure,
disclosure.
okay. Does anybody else? Second? Okay. So I apologize for being late, everyone. Life happens. The item on the agenda is policy workshop, marijuana discussion and deliberation on the 2024 applicants, numerical scores, narrative decisions, and next steps. So I guess this is the discussion to deliberate on the process and the next steps, but I think before we begin the board's discussion, I'm going to ask the town administrator for her recommendation on where we go. Yeah.
Thank you. So I do have a recommendation for the board, and I'm going to give it to you, and then if I may, I'd like to just make a few comments about it. So I fully understand that this is the select board's decision. You are the review committee. Going through this process with you and seeing how events unfolded, it is my recommendation that the select board consider canceling the RFA at this time. Now, I do not at all make that recommendation for your consideration lightly. I know that all of you have put in an enormous amount of work into this process, and I know that the applicants who have submitted responses have put in an enormous amount of work into this process. However, we made it clear from the beginning and wrote it straight into our materials that the town reserves the right to award a host community agreement in a manner that best serves the interest of the town. Further, that the town reserves the right to cancel this RFA at any time. That is my recommendation for the board's consideration.
Thank you. Do you have, you want to share any reasons why we should do it? I mean, why are you making this recommendation to us?
So, as you know, when we embarked on this discussion in the spring, we had a lengthy discussion about the fact, one, that this is new and that we have not done it before, and that we are working in an unsettled environment without clear guidance, and that there's risk involved with that. And we had a number of meetings along the way where we worked through some of these issues. At various points along the way, questions were raised and concerns were raised, and the board decided as a group that we were going to continue on and see how the process unfolded and see what happened. I think there has been considerable questions raised about how applications were evaluated, and I think that the board members need to have a discussion about that and reach a point of comfort on whether or not you as a board are confident that in how we proceeded. You have not made any decisions yet. You haven't made any votes, you have reserved your rights to not issue or to not enter into any negotiations for HCA's. It's up to you to kind of talk as a group to determine if you feel like we did, in my opinion, we did the best job that we could. We tried very hard. Do you think that at the end of the day, you're comfortable with the process as it played out? Or are there points along the way you want to go back and make adjustments?
Sorry, I'm writing.
That's okay.
I can't. I think you raised some good points. So we're gonna have a discussion as a board, and I kind of want to go back to one of our early meetings last February, or January, which seems like a really long time ago. But one of the things that the board said as we started discussing our process and our criteria and what we wanted to do, that one of the things that we really wanted to make sure was that we had a process and were comfortable that we were going to avoid legal problems through our process, and that was one of our big goals. And right now, that is one of my big concerns about where we sit in this process. So I'm happy to have thoughts from the board. I think this has got to be an open, just a discussion about how we feel and what the process was like for us and in the rating and in the evaluation and what the board thinks we should do. So I'll take comments from anyone.
I can just start, I'll just maybe
Okay.
say a few thoughts. I mean, I think for me, the process has been confusing. This is new to me. The Cannabis Control Commission, the policies, but they did sort of outline it for us. So a lot of it was really handed to us from the CCC. But at the same time, I feel like when we were doing this scoring thing, it got very confusing. And then we went from 75 to 100, from 100 to 75. And then when we got the scoring rubric, I didn't really realize how I don't want to say terrible of a job we did, but I'm saying it didn't really hit me until I actually had the scoring sheets in front of me, and I had to score the candidates based on what we had in there. And, I scored fairly based on what we needed legally from the CCC, and that's where my scores came from. It had nothing to do with any other factor. But it's really confusing as to where we go from here, because we never did agree, and I know that, we never did say that the top 3 scorers were going to be the ones we
we never
chose,
said that.
but that's the assumption, right? You get scored the highest, you think you were the chosen parties, right? So maybe we slacked a little bit there, because did we make that clear? Did our candidates know that? Did we make that perfectly clear? So I'm very concerned about the legalities. The state is very clear, and I have read some case law related to negligence in relation to sort of host community agreements and this whole social equity piece that isn't clearly understood. And the state is pretty clear on what meets the commission's minimum municipal equity standards. And that's really where I'm coming from, because my job as a select board member is to protect the town and to make decisions that protect the residents and protect our youth and protect everybody's interests, along with our our cannabis stores and businesses that we want to see open and succeed and do well. But I feel like I'm just kind of at a place where I'm not sure I want to pull back the RFP, but there's ways to maybe meet the standards, right? I mean, they do give criteria here, and I think some of it was written in the letter. So, with that said, the scoring was definitely that's where it hit me, that it didn't make sense. And I tried to score logically based on our criteria. And I had to add points for some of the candidates because I think there should have been scored in the diversity and equity column. So if I felt like they needed points there and it says we couldn't put it, I gave the points anyhow. So I don't know. It's a tricky place right now. So that's where I'm at, I guess. It's been a lot of work done.
Anne Marie.
Sure. Would have been nice to have a crystal ball. There are several concerns at this point in time that I think we do need to take a long, hard look at. You're right, Mary Jane. The first objective that we all agreed upon when Marlene asked us, what are the dues, it was prior to you, Jean, but the first question asked on day one, and the first minute of our meeting, was what are our objectives? What don't we want to happen, and what do we want to happen? And all of us at the same time agreed that litigation was not an option, and that whatever path we traveled down, that we would keep that in the back of our minds. At this point in time, in hindsight, right, being able to look back now, I do have issues with the scoring criteria, and I had them all along. And perhaps I should have pushed a little harder on it. There's some unfair scoring criteria boxes in the process. My main concerns are the risks moving forward from here. Risks of litigation, risk of not being in compliance with some minimum requirements, especially pertaining to municipal equity, social equity, HCA agreements, and the most recent ones that were promulgated on October 27th, 2023. Risk of being fined for noncompliance. That'll be initiated March 1st, 2025. Risk of the work done, and that has not been lost on me. I was a no vote, but the work that was done by the citizens to bring the repeal of the ban forward, it has not been lost on me. And the risk of not having any licenses be issued for anyone in the town of Bourne as well. And I think those are really high risks at this juncture that we're at. There's some gray areas with what the compliance should be, right? And it's purposely written that way, right?
Yeah.
And the one size doesn't fit all, okay? So when you look at, we only have 3 outside other communities that have multiple, how many in Carver? How many in Taunton? How many, it's not one size fits all. And that's a frustration level with all regulations. We're dealing it with our, DEP regulations right now in the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. We have health regulations. And one of the arguing factors when the ban was repealed was it's so highly regulated. It's so highly regulated. And we can't ignore what those regulations are. We can't ignore the intent of, especially for the social equity piece of the regulations. If you look back in history, I agree with the intent and the spirit of the social equity regulations. How they're laying it out is a little tough for us, right? Because as a municipality, we want to be able, if we have to choose one of the 3, we want to be able to generate as much revenue as we possibly can, and that's difficult with the 3 choices. But
I just want to interject something. If we had known about that when we went to town meeting or did our zoning, we might have said 4.
right,
Said 4, so we could do 50%.
yeah, again, the
I
crystal
mean,
ball.
It's all, hindsight is 20/20, so yeah.
Yeah. So for those reasons, I think I don't know what the next action step should be. Should it be canceling, or should we somehow navigate how we're going to adhere to the minimum requirements as we enter into the possibility of negotiations for an HCA agreements, right? So that's kind of like the ultimate question, and how that gets answered. And what's that action step? For me, it's probably two choices. Do we try to meet the minimum requirements moving forward in making decisions about HCA agreements? Or do we cancel the process from here and review what the process is and how do we make it better?
Thank you. Anybody else? Jean, you want to speak?
Yeah, I did, being elected, coming in a little later, I did go to some of the earlier, or attend through Zoom, some of the other workshops, especially when you guys were discussing the social equity component. I think that was right around that time. But I was on the planning board before, and we were talking about what could happen, and MJ was attending by Zoom some of those meetings where I discussed, 3. Really, 3? Can we do I was trying to vouch for math, which is tough, but a percentage of versus package stores
Yep.
to, is there a way we can do this so it doesn't have to be cut and dry at 3? And it was also discussed, if this could happen, what would be the harm in just working with top 2 to start, instead of canceling the whole process? Were there expectations that there were 3 to be awarded? And even with that question, it makes that gray in itself, which, says to me we should take a step back and think about how is that fair? If there were expectations that the top 3 were going to be awarded off the top, and we gave extra points to social equity, and with the idea that there could be, because there was question about how things were going to go with the state, could we appeal based on the fact that we only have 3, and the amount and so on, and we did give someone a step up. I think we need to take another step back and see, if the outcome is gray and it's unfair and expectations are not being met, and that's asking for litigation in some regard for somebody. And in this process, it's hard. Everyone worked really hard, put a ton of time in, and somebody was going to hear no at some point. We couldn't take everyone, but I don't want to feel I want people to feel like the process was fair and transparent, and right now, I think that's being questioned.
Do you have something to add, or?
Want to go first? I can go after you.
No, I'll defer to the rest of the board.
This, we've been at this for a long, for a good amount of time. From, when the private petition went in, to get the signatures, to get this on the town meeting warrant. People work hard to get this approved, so the applicants would have the option to come in this room and apply. Now, we went through creating, the ACA and the different things, over the last 7-9 months. And it was transparent because we were here, it was on TV. But along the way, if you really dig into some of these applicants, this is their livelihood. If we turn around and say, oh, we're going to suspend it or walk away and start over again, these people who put their lives on hold, some of them local, were dependent on the possibility of this. It's all for naught. And it's just hard for me because you're dealing with people's lives when you're making these decisions. When with jobs and everything else, the investment of the property and, the time they put in for engineering and everything else. I just feel bad because, the applicants did their part in good faith. And now all of a sudden, because we don't like the way it came out, now we want to take the ball and go home. I guess have a serious, by suspending or by suspending or starting the process over again. I just think that we should think long and hard and not decide today on any decision, because, I mean, Marlene's recommendation, you know, it has dire consequences with it. And I'm not ready, and I'm not ready for that.
I'm not sure we should make any decisions
Yeah,
today.
I don't think-
I actually kind of feel, I think we have two paths to consider. And I think there's only two paths. And I think the one path is to say, we need to go back to the drawing board on the RFA, because the problem, the transparency comes for the process. The Cannabis Control Commission is very clear. Your grading criteria, your process, all that has to be upfront, clearly understood, so that the applicants understand the process, that we understand the process, and that's what makes it transparent. And there's things that were difficult. I mean, I know when I sat down to do the ratings and the criteria, there were things I couldn't give points for, and the things I had to take points away from, that, you know, really, it was really difficult. So, I think we worked really hard on it. We gave it a really good try, but I'm not sure that was good. The other question, and a couple of people have said this, is there a way for us to go forward based on this RFA and adhere to the minimum requirements for social equity without having people question that we didn't follow our process, we changed the process after the RFA? And I think that's really the problem. If we come up to the minimum requirement by doing one-to-one and doing that thing that we didn't put in our policy, then we're changing the requirement. And there are people that might have applied differently. They might have put a social equity candidate into their pool of ownership with, you know, to make their application compliant. I mean, obviously, some people went out and got a, 5% Bourne resident, so they have a Bourne resident point. I mean, so if you don't lay out your criteria and your policy correctly ahead of time in preparation for the RFA, then the applicants don't have the right information and we don't have the right information. So that's my concern about going to that route. And what I would say that I would like our town council to advise us on whether there is a way for us to do that, or whether the only way to do that, only way to get in compliance with the minimum required standards is to start again. And I'm gonna go back, go ahead.
Is there a way, though, to not, because I agree with Peter, I mean, we've done a lot of work here. And these folks that are sitting here today have taken a lot of time and energy putting these applications together. Is there any way, and we can ask our legal counsel, is there a way to move forward where we can allow them to come back to the table and not necessarily throw the RFP away, but give them a second opportunity to, I mean, I don't know.
Well, that's, I mean,
Right.
I don't know, that's not, we can't
and
answer
next
that,
ask-
and
Again,
the town
the
council would
option,
have to, yeah.
this is an option if people agreed. I mean, number 3 was, it meets the commission's minimum municipal equity standards. So that was another thing I looked at. It doesn't bode well for everyone, because there has to be the social equity candidate first. And then they have to be in business for a year before we can issue another license.
not
They have
a
to-
year.
They
They
have
just
to
have to
up
open.
and running, sorry, yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
They have to be
They have
up
to
and
be
running.
up and running. I
running.
was getting the year from how long it would
Another
take.
HCA is executed.
Before another HCA is executed, but it would allow to continue this RFP process and get other people to.
Right, and I don't,
Your
the
point.
question for town council is, that changes our social,
Well,
well, we
right.
say we could reserve one for social equity in our social equity policy. So I need town council to lay out, is that move defensible? I mean, but it being defensible means that you're defending something. And
Right.
the cancellation of an RFA is a right that we have because they're.
Correct.
And that's,
So
we don't
what
have to
is the
defend
the
that.
lesser of the two, what risks
I just
involved?
wanted to correct something, that's all, because there was an assumption made that isn't necessarily, doesn't reflect the law. I just, well, for the conversation to go on, I'm not advocating for me, just wanted to explain the reg, 10
Maybe
seconds tops.
Town council should be doing that.
Yeah, 10 seconds, just to,
Not
not
yet.
to
No,
advocate, just to explain the regulation. Because
no, I don't know what the regulation is, and I'm not making any ruling on any regulation. I'm going to ask my town council for the regulation.
the idea that you couldn't issue a.
Excuse me, excuse me. So,
I kind of want to hear.
So, the other thing I want to kind of go back into in our process is we voted our social equity policy at the beginning of July with, I would say, the board's understanding that our social equity policy would be able to be uploaded to the Cannabis Control Commission website, right? We thought it was going to be uploaded. And then after the RFPs went out and the town tried to upload that to the Cannabis Control website, the screenshot required us to certify, to certify that we were compliant with one of the three things of being compliant, which is very small print here, and I'm not going to be able to read it.
It's here.
But we weren't able to certify any of those because we didn't follow their template. We didn't adopt a one-on-one, and we didn't, just say totally, we're not going to do anything but social equity. So that's another problem that we have with this RF. And we kind of said we're going to go forward anyway. I mean, maybe we should have canceled then, but we said we'd go forward to see how it played out. Who knew how it was going to play out? We could have got 5 social equity candidates and it could have been all good. But so here we're in a situation where even if we were to award HCAs to, say, a social equity and a non-social equity to do one-on-one, we're not in compliance. We haven't completed the Cannabis Control Commission's portal, and so.
But if we had it, we could check that box and then we could move ahead to the next step in the portal, correct? Or am I wrong on that?
I think we have to adjust our
If we
policy.
could check one of those 3 boxes, we could go to the next step.
Well, our policy is the what and the why. I
Right.
look at this as more as an action step
Okay,
as we enter into negotiations. And that's, town council to kind of correct.
so 3 is the host community has created a local approval process for equity applicants that does that one-on-one thing, and we did not do that. We would be required, we have to create that local policy that does that in order to be able to check that off.
So we have a letter from the lawyer. I'm looking.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
I think. I mean, this is my thinking of, these are the things we have to ask town council, because I think that we need our town council to actually give us a roadmap of what we have to do. And then, I don't think this needs to take a lot of time. I don't think we need that many tweaks in the process. Even if we did another RFQ, we could have it out for 2 weeks and people could just resubmit what they resubmitted, and then I don't see that as a big problem, even though that was,
Speaking, there is talk of a waiver, but if you couldn't receive the candidates, but we are, so.
yeah.
Right.
MJ, may I?
Yes, please.
So I do think you absolutely do need to give council some time to give you some advice.
Right.
So this is, discussion is ongoing. Now, the reason I'm put on the table for you to consider the cancellation is, if you remember, when we issued the packet, when we issued your packet, your scoring criteria was included in here, and your social equity policy was included in here. So this is the material that we put out on the street. This is what we said we were doing. So my concern is that now, if you change your policy and you change your scoring after we put this out on the street, we have not communicated correctly at the bidding stage.
Right.
So I know this isn't under 30B, I know this is different, but just as a quick example, if I put out a bid for a new fire station with a set of plans saying this is what I'm looking for, and then I get applications back and I try to negotiate a contract for a completely different building, that's not a fair process. Because at the end of the day, what I'm asking for is not what I said I was asking for. That's my concern with the RFA. So I do think there is a path forward to fixing it, but if you fix it after the RFA cycle, in my opinion, we have to do the RFA cycle again with the new rules of the road.
Right.
Yeah. I would agree, that would give a clearer set of expectations, and there was some more guidance.
But there's no question that this is a very complicated and concern, and the town has some exposure here. So I do think it is certainly in your best interest to give council some time to sort through this, give it some careful thought, and give you some well-defined advice.
Real quick. So I'm just curious, has the Cannabis Control Commission, since May, defined local approval to operate and license yet? Have they done that? Do we know that answer?
I can't answer that.
These terms are not defined in the regulations, it says.
What area's up there on the screen? Maybe she knows.
Maybe she could, yes, okay, Ivory is up there. No, let MJ, I'll pass it to MJ, I'm just asking.
So I do think that you should certainly ask the questions and give but understand, council might need time to prepare their response. So I do think it is very important that we put all of the questions on the table.
Right. So maybe we should have listened to you back in July.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a complicated issue, and the regulations were recently promulgated with very little guidance by the commission. So I agree with everything that has been said. I think, it's wise to give us time to be able to put in writing our thoughts about what we should do now that we're at this stage in the process. I appreciate hearing all the questions. I will take them back. We will incorporate them into a letter that we can provide to the board for your review.
Would it be possible in that letter to outline steps that we might need to complete to be able to quickly become in compliance and then reissue?
Absolutely. We can provide kind of a safest path forward type option for you, and you can decide how you want to move forward.
My sense of the board is that moving towards the compliance process where we do check the third one, where we say we do the one-on-one, and when one's up and running, then we issue the second one, that I think that's kind of where the board's going. I don't think we're going to do an exclusively social equity thing
You would
And,
have to go to town meeting for something.
Correct. The bylaws would have to go to town meeting.
right, but I want to ask a question on ordinance, because there's no definition of ordinance in the Cannabis Control Commission, and I know ordinance is generally considered like that a mayor and a city council do ordinances, but an ordinance can also be a policy. And if we do have a policy, like is our social equity policy that we as a select board, as the executive branch, pass, is that an ordinance?
I think they're really talking about a bylaw there when they're talking about adopting a model ordinance or bylaw. Are you talking about that option?
Yeah.
Yeah, they really are talking about like a town meeting adopted bylaw. You know, we talked about this from the start. I think some of the Cannabis Control Commission regulations are clear on their face and others are a bit more ambiguous. And whether or not you have to comply with one of those three options, I think as municipal council, I think the answer to that is no. It's not drafted that in a way that the town must do one of these three things. If you do one of those three things, you are presumed to be in compliance. So municipal councils across the Commonwealth are troubled by the way in which the Cannabis Control Commission has created this submittal process for their policy, where you can't move forward unless you have done one of those three things. It seems like they are not giving communities the ability to demonstrate that they are in compliance, notwithstanding the fact that they haven't done one of those three options.
Right.
But I can go into more detail in the letter. Obviously, if you do one of those three things, that puts you in compliance and is the safest path forward, and we've talked about that before.
So at this point, we take no action until we hear back from town council with the answer to our questions, and hopefully it will be in a reasonable amount of time. That's not gonna take forever. But what's reasonable?
I don't know. What's your time frame in getting an opinion back to us? Brian, you guys want to chime in?
Absolutely. So, I do think we could probably get a letter back to you by the 25th. We would want a week to really vet the letter. I would also ask that you individually, without copying anyone else on the board, send whatever questions you have to the town administrator, who could then forward them to our office so that I am sure that I am answering all of the questions that this board has.
Okay.
All right, that's fine.
And Brian, do you have edits to that answer? Sorry, I didn't call that.
No, that's actually a perfect answer. I was gonna say, I think with the Thanksgiving holiday coming up, we can do it quickly, but, we're the ones that work over Thanksgiving, not the board. And then after Thanksgiving, they can start to work, but ultimately, they are the client, so they tell us what they want.
So the 25th is a week from Monday. Is that what you meant? The 25th of November? Is that what you said? You said a week and then you said the 25th, so.
Yeah, I would appreciate, so I mean, I could get it to you by the 22nd if that works for you. Like Brian said, we work on your schedule. I think, giving me, 4 days at least to kind of make sure that this has been vetted, it would behoove the board.
Okay. And right now, we don't have a meeting on the 26th. So I don't know what we do with it. It's the 28th Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so, yeah.
So we get our questions in by the end of the day tomorrow, and then the town administrator collates them over the weekend and gets them out, and then we wait to get our answer back.
Yeah, I don't see this being on the select board agenda until December 3rd, which is a pretty full agenda, but, and if we're gonna do it as a separate meeting, we should think about when we wanna do that.
Do it the next day on the 4th,
I can't do it on the
or the
4th.
2nd. It's a Monday. The Monday works for me, because I know later that week I'll be up in Boston.
I can't do, I could do maybe a early evening meeting that Monday.
Yeah, I'm open.
Available.
I'm open all day on the 2nd.
Yeah, I have
In the
I have a a vet appointment for my dog at 1 o'clock that it's taken me 4 weeks to get, so I'm not canceling it.
Oh, understood.
Between 11:30 and 6 is my availability
missing
for
something.
December 2nd.
I feel like I'm supposed
Well,
to be somewhere, but
I guess,
it's not on that
I
calendar.
guess. Not really, but I not the-
Like I said, on that day, I'm flexible. Whatever it is, I'll be here.
Well, how can you give time for the meeting? We should do it after the vet appointment. Do you want to do it later?
Like 4:35.
Well, you said you only have till 6, right?
I can do 4:30. I can do 4:30.
I think I could probably do 4. I don't,
Okay.
they said the consult meeting is usually like an hour, so I should be able to get her home and then get back here by 4. Or we could meet 4:30 to 6. Is that good? Let's do the 4:30.
4:30.
This is December 2nd at 4:30.
4:30,
Yeah.
yeah. Is that okay for you?
I will attend by Zoom.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to get here in person, but I'll try.
Okay. So we'll plan for that, and we'll see how it goes.
Do you want a motion that we take no action at this time? Or I guess just assume and just get scheduled the next meeting when we do it?
I don't think we need a motion.
All right, then a
I
motion.
mean, I don't know how does the board feel that they want a motion?
No.
And do we want to, I mean, we've talked about town council giving us some action steps about how, is there a way to adhere to the minimum requirement? What is, their recommendations on, is it better to
Are we allowing
cancel
comments?
or?
The next steps moving were in the least amount of risk, actionable steps that need to be taken next.
Right.
What, bearing that in mind.
Do we want to hear from anyone here that's here in the public, or are we just keeping this as a board discussion?
Keep it as a board for right now until we get our answers back.
Yeah. So I do want to remind people who are applicants that if you do wish to communicate with the board, it is important that you send your communication to the town administrator's office and not to individual board members, so that it can be properly routed. And we appreciate it when it's handled that way. So, thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is that it? Yep. Motion by Peter, second by Anne Marie. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous.